It is on to the ElseViews. This is the section of the show where we talk about the TV shows, movies, comic books, music, basically whatever we've been watching over the past 2-3 weeks, since we were last here. Corey, you got anything, or because
You know what?
I've got a couple I can talk.
I can jump on a grenade and and say that I watched and pretty much enjoyed for the most part. Bright.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I'm the guy. I'm the one. I must be the 11 million views that it got on opening weekend. Although I only remember watching it once. And this was from
Now,
this is from the person who directed what became Suicide Squad after someone else got their grubby mitts on it, right?
Yeah. So this is from David Ayer, but now you said something interesting because I mean it's not like you watched El Camino Christmas or something like that.
I don't even know what that is.
That was one of the with Netflix revealing all these different statistics. They also released a statistic for one of their other new movies that came out that stars Tim Allen called El Camino Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. It was another Christmas movie that actually stars Rose McIver for My Zombie.
The boyfriend something or the prince or I don't know.
He's like, oh, all these guys watch this one. It's like probably because Rose McIver because she's hot.
I had seen the commercial for Bright way back when, and a lot of people that I am friends with, most of us are gamers, are and I mean like role playing gamers. So this looked like modern day Dungeons and Dragons. And there was some of that. There really wasn't enough of that.
Yeah.
We got trolls, we got elves, we got fairy in a bug zapper. Not a lot beyond that. But I feel like I think by the time I saw this, it was already the plan that there was going to be more movies. And then Netflix announced a sequel almost immediately after it hit the air. But I definitely see it as the world building. There wasn't a ton of it, but I didn't hate that there wasn't a ton of it. And it doesn't do all the in-your-face shit that, again, going back to Suicide Squad, what it got edited in to do, where they put up the character blurbs for all the people that they show up on screen, and here's this guy, and he's good with a noose, and here's this guy, and he likes to bite people's heads off and shit. But it had some of the basic character types of, like in Suicide Squad, Killer Croc was very gangsta-esque. And that's how you say that, Jeopardy, gangsta. But they did a little bit of that with the trolls in this, so it felt kind of like that's, I don't know if that's a racial profiling thing or what, but it just seemed like, yeah, that's what they do. And the elves are elvish, except they're all dicks and heavily magic users in this, at least. But it was just fun. You know, it was a fun, good, action-heavy, being chased through the city, buddy cop who don't like each other kind of thing. It's like 48 Hours meets, oh God, what was, I'm trying to think of a movie where people get chased. Attack the Block, maybe.
Okay.
Where they're running away from aliens and stuff, or everybody's coming after you. The Warriors is another good example of that. I think Alien Nation, certainly in the relationship of the two characters to each other, good call, Beat. Very much that. All things that I like. All things that make for a good, fun film. The Dredd movie. Except the Dredd movie all happened inside one building. The us against the world, or the world really against us thing, and trying to find their way out of it and not getting along at the same time, not having the best relationship. I can't think of anything that is a major complaint about this movie. And overall, like, if the sequel hit tomorrow, I'd gladly watch the sequel. Yeah. You know, not because I'm expecting it to be better, but just as more of the same. I would like to see more of this. Now, I know that they released some backstory short or something that's supposed to give you more information about it. If you're the sort of person who needs that thing, then sure. And I wouldn't mind seeing it, but it hasn't been urgent for me. I got what I needed out of the movie, you know, and I got it with the idea that there will be more of this too, but I didn't feel lost in it. I didn't feel like there was anything in the story that was like some big plot hole that doesn't explain that needed to. It's just like it doesn't over explain. It brings you in, it gives you just enough, and it lays out the premise, and you run with it, or they run with it. I don't know what the common complaint really was about it. I saw so many things saying that it's not a good movie, and I don't know that I would say it's a great movie, but it tells a better story than a lot of other stuff that I've seen be successful and or expect to be successful because it's a huge blockbuster. I just thought it was fun. Oh, and the guy who played the troll partner, just real fast,
Joel, isn't Joel Edgerton?
I loved his character. I absolutely loved his character because he's just so earnest, and this place like doesn't really. I can't say that he's not bright, but he's just not street smart for wanting to be a cop. But all of his motivations and stuff, as you find them out and you see his character, just felt authentic, and his comedy chops were really good. Like how he was interacting with Will Smith's character was all really good. And I didn't recognize him from other stuff, mostly because of the makeup. Yeah. But I was really glad with his performance.
That's good. I mean, it's one of the things that like this has been on my radar, but then again, I find like we talked about earlier, I find myself going into the comfort hole of let's watch Travel Man, or these shows that I've already seen, like let's just watch them or whatever, while I'm going to use this as my segue, reading comic books like Quantum and Woody #1, written by Daniel Kibblesmith with art by Kano. And this, we talked about it earlier on last year, because they announced that this was a reboot, that this was happening, and I had seen it through Comic Shop News, and I'm like, all right, cool, so it's coming out here relatively soon. Then I saw it, I'm like, all right, buying it. Now, for whatever reason, I've mainly stuck with DC and Marvel, DC, Marvel, and Image when it comes to my comics, and then Archie for Archie Comics with Archie, and then Jughead when they are doing those comics. But it's mainly the big three, and it's nothing against the other guys. It's just I have never really had a good jumping on point, but this is a great jumping on point. They give you the origin of the characters in a way, and then they give you the stuff that is happening right now with this story. Not only that, this has got me. They have in the end of here a 2 or 3 page preview of the next issue of Exo Manowar, which they're billing it as a jumping on point. And I'm like, I was reading it, I'm like, I might pick up Exo Manowar. So they're doing their job here, Valiant, of here, check out this from us as well, or check out that from us as well. The story, really quick, because it's a #1, they're doing a lot of setup here. You meet Quantum and Woody or Eric and Woody in their secret hideout, as they called it, which their treehouse and their backyard. And you figure out that Woody, his parents died or something, so he's been adopted by Eric's family and all this. Then you fast forward to the present day where they're adults, where they become superheroes, or Quantum gets recruited to become a superhero. Woody's trying to do the whole package deal thing. They go their own ways, but and you can explain their powers a little bit more, but basically they have to come and, as they say, clang, touch bracelets every 3 weeks or something like that, every so often. Otherwise they explode, and they've grown to resent each other and all that stuff. But it was good. It's hard for me to explain because I'm remembering pieces out of order. But I mean, all in all, it's a great comic. Like I mentioned it before we got on here, Gordon. I'm like, I really think you would enjoy this.
Yeah, classic Quantum Woody, back when it was created, when Valiant got purchased by Acclaim, was, I want to say created by, it was certainly brought about and recognized as being under the helm of Christopher Priest. Christopher Priest, who's had a recent resurgence doing stuff with DC with Deathstroke, and now he just started doing the Justice League book and widely considered to be a hugely talented writer, but hasn't had like major successes that like you would think of him being. He, in people's minds, he's a bigger name than what his books have done sales wise throughout the years. His Black Panther run, his group, The Crew. He also went by a different name on some of his stuff too. I want to say it's Owlsy, but I could be completely wrong on that. I've always liked Priest, and I think he does a good line between doing stuff that can be very serious and very real world feeling in stories, and then also doing comedy. And Quantum and Woody was this great book because of the partnership, the buddy cops who hate each other thing of a 48 Hours versus a Lethal Weapon. Although the first Lethal Weapon, they definitely didn't get along. Quantum and Woody, the fact that they had to rely on each other because they had to touch or clang their wrists together to get their powers to activate a G-cell beam, which I think is kind of what they do in The Gifted, right? Isn't that what the teens do? Is it has to do with proximity? Their powers improve or get stronger? That's the way the characters were in the comics.
Yeah, it goes in like that with a little bit later on in the show, but the way it starts is the girl, she creates like sort of like air shields. So with honestly, with how they look on the TV, they sort of look like silicone, almost like breast implant things that just pop up and appear, because they're all just like little like pocket shaped things. And then the boy, he just like, as he gets angry, he just tears things apart. But as they focus in on these same things, it becomes super duper destructive, much like their comic book counterparts. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, and Quantum Woody, one of them is the more serious one who wears an actual costume, a mask, and a cape and everything. And the other one is kind of the cool guy, lean back wearing sunglasses opposed to a mask, and doesn't take anything seriously and always lets you down. But that's the joy of it. And since the revival of Valiant in the last few years, I was reading Archer and Armstrong, which I had never really read before, but I was reading that series when Fred Van Lente was writing it. And those characters, kind of the same thing. Archer, very serious, very kind of regal and more like a knight, and Armstrong is the boisterous, drunk, immortal guy who is a little bit more like Thor, leaning towards Volstagg. Like if you think of Thor in the first Thor movie, where he's like throwing tankards into the fire and all that stuff, that's Armstrong. And Archer is the guy who's like, he's got a quest and he takes his quest very seriously and he wants to follow through it. But that, again, the conjecture of the two of them together and how that works, and just some amazing storytelling around those characters, which kind of all added up to it. So Quantum Woody, Archer and Armstrong, kind of the same ideas. It's just in how they play out. Yeah. And in both cases, that's not a bad story to jump through. It's just that how many times you go to the same well in the same universe. Yeah,
true. But yeah, overall, I mean, I like the book. The other ones that I've been reading, I mean, Doomsday Clock, I've been enjoying. Speaking of Jeff Johns, and then the resurrection of Jean Grey of the Phoenix, that's been a compelling story as well. Actually, with that one of the first things I've ever done is bought an expensive variant. I bought a $20 comic book with the issue 1 with the, I believe it was the 1 in 25 printing variant. I'm like, well, I want to read it. I don't want to, I actually want to pay for the comic, so I'll do it. And all that, but yeah.
Those are just they didn't have any of the regular covers available?
No, so because what I had been doing, or I have been doing, is going into the comic store on Fridays when I get paid, every other week. And so in this week, this time I'd actually saved up some money to where I could go this past Wednesday, which is when I got Quantum and Woody last week. But when I'd gotten this week's comics, or this past week's comics with Batman White Knight and a couple other books, I got in there and that was the last issue they had, was the 1 in 25 variants.
So you weren't looking to buy a variant, but it just, all the other ones had sold out, you were like, well, I'll just go for it then.
And it was the same this past week because the Phoenix Resurrection series is every week. Like for starting 2 weeks ago, it's 5 weeks, just boom, 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 boom. And when I went there this past Wednesday, I had the option of a regular variant for $6 or another one at 25. I'm like, I'm not doing that one. I'm gonna do this one. And so and but again, I don't regret it because it's it's one of those, like, I opened it up to the back to get the digital code and read it digitally through the Marvel Comics app, but yet didn't do. So it's like, it's in good condition. It's in my long box or my short box over here.
It's kind of a rite of passage. Every comics fan, like a comics fan of someone who goes to and supports their local comic shop, which is not to say that people who read digitally are not comics fans or not true comics fans. Of course they are. But that first time that you get your first variant, it's better when you do it by a conscious choice of like, oh, I really want to get this variant. This is the one that I'm looking to get into. But it's still it's kind of like that moment of like, oh, I got this and this a perceived value, because all of it is, of course, only perceived. It's not realistic to say that this thing that's printed on the same kind of paper as everything else and has the same stock of cover as everything else, but just has different artwork on it, is actually valued higher. It's like sports cards or anything. You don't need it to live. It's a want, not a need. But to have that one thing and treat it a little bit more special and keep it bag and boarded to keep it pristine, maybe one day save up to get it slabbed and CG graded or whatever. That's kind of neat. When shortly after I moved to California and I was working at the comic store out here, the Fantasy Books and Games, the first job I had out here, that was when Gen 13 did their #1 that had, I want to say, 13 covers for their regular series. They'd had their miniseries already, and then they did the multiple covers. But that seems low because there were a lot of covers. Might have been closer to 30. And I remember getting a bunch of those covers for a friend who was really into Gen 13. And it was not easy to get any of them, let alone, it seemed, I think at that point, kind of impossible to get all of them unless you had pre-ordered and done all that stuff. But it was cool to do it. And some of the covers were exceptionally neat. So that's what I would concentrate on. I'm always the person who tries to buy the cover that I think looks good, not necessarily is the rarest one. Or more often than not, I'm the person who'll buy the cover that's by the interior artist. I like having the interior artist do the covers because I like to know what I'm getting into when I open a book. I don't want to see this really spectacular poster-styled art on the front and then open it up and it looks like drawn over shit inside, which is not necessarily the case if there's a cover artist versus an interior artist, but it's been often the case, especially lately when they switch artists from month to month on a book and you don't have a consistent storytelling style the whole way across.
There's been a few exceptions to that rule for me, but mainly I follow that same thing. Like, like I've bought in other variants. I need to get what I believe issue 4 and 5 are not one. They're not 4 and 5, but they're part 4 and part 5 of Descenders Rise of the Robots event because they had the interconnecting issues covers. Got the first 3. I have 2 copies of the first one actually because I had accidentally bought the one and I'm like, no, I want the inner cover, and they ordered it for me and I'm like, oh, I still want the book, so I want to read it and all that. So I have issue number 1 twice. I think I have that with some of the Champions books, but it's one of those things with all these, I buy what cover interests me the most when I'm looking at at Nostalgia Inc. at my local comic shop that looks good. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do that one. And sometimes it's like they don't order enough, or I just, because I show up on a Friday, they've run out, and I'm like, oh well, this is slim pickings, okay. And if it's an issue that's I really want, I'll be like, all right, can you order me this and all that so that I can have this book and not cry or something, something like that. But I mean, I don't know. I look at this, I look at that, I'm like, it looks like a cool cover. So I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna not pay $20 for that cover if it's gonna be crap.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah. So that is the ElseViews. I stuck to one mainly. I talked about a couple other things, but that was just more quick picks.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.